tuning in. It is the 4th of May 2020 and we've got a stellar lineup of biotechs listed on the ASX presenting today. We also have an unlisted company called Microba, and Microba is up next. Microba has established itself as a world leader in the analysis of gut microbiome, with a growing body of global research indicating that gut microbiome plays a central role in health and disease. Microba is a strong contributing force in the development of new pathology services, therapeutics, and diagnostics based on the microbiome. Microba, as I said, is not yet listed, but its existing investors include Thorney, Perennial Value, and Allium. Blake Willis is the CEO of the company, and Blake is a proven leader and company executive who has worked in the finance, life sciences, and education sectors. During these roles, he has launched and acquired multiple businesses in Australia and overseas. As the CEO of Microba, Mr. Wills has made world-leading tech available to researchers, clinicians, and consumers, providing new insight into the gut microbiome. You can take it away for us today, Blake.
Thank you, Laura. And thank you everyone for joining today to learn a little bit more about Microba. So first and foremost, we are a gut health company, but more specifically, we are a gut microbiome company. For those who aren't aware, the gut microbiome is the community of organisms that live in our large intestine. They include bacteria, virus, and fungi. And they've been demonstrated to be critical in our overall health and well-being as they help us digest food, they produce essential vitamins and metabolites. They also interact very closely with the immune system. Clearly, gut health has become a very important topic, and the gut microbiome is central to that. Scientists and doctors alike are now describing the gut microbiome as a new organ in the human body. And at Microba, we have technology which is unlocking and helping us to measure this community of bacteria. We're particularly interested in the role these bacteria are playing in health and disease. So just quickly, a disclaimer. In terms of the highlights, Microba operates in the digestive healthcare market. We've seen the probiotic market, kombucha, and a range of industries surrounding gut health explode in recent times as people have become aware just how important digestive health is. And more importantly, how many people are suffering a digestive health condition such as irritable bowel syndrome, which affects 1 in 5 Australians and has similar rates in Western societies around the world. This company, Microba, has been founded by Professor Phil Hugenholtz and Professor Jean Tyson. They're in the top 1% of researchers globally. We'll spend a little bit more time on their background shortly. Also, Professor Ian Fraser, who is the inventor of Gardasil, which is a cervical cancer vaccine. That's a $3 billion drug, which is sold by Merck at the moment. Ian's a key Australian scientist and very well regarded in this space. He's been instrumental, chairs our medical advisory board, and is a deputy chairman of the company. Microba has built a platform technology, and in doing so, we've launched products which have now sold to over 10,000 customers. We've sold over $3 million in sales, and we've trained over 1,000 healthcare practitioners. Furthermore, we've expanded from our Australian origination in terms of our home base here in Brisbane, but we've now got our first revenues in the US. We've signed a major partnership in Asia, and we've just announced a major partnership in Europe as well, which we'll touch on in more detail. We're particularly focused on the US healthcare market, which we're in advanced negotiations with a number of US healthcare providers. And in addition to that, we're using the data that we generate from offering a test to identify organisms associated with disease and their therapeutic application. So can these bugs and the bioactives they produce be turned into drugs? There's certainly a lot of evidence that they can. And at Microba, we're in a really strong position with our leading data set to identify the bacteria that are most relevant. So the team that's involved, let's start with the science. Professor Ian Fraser, I touched, he's our deputy chairman. We have Professor Jean Tyson and Professor Phil Hugenholtz, who are the scientific co-founders, spent time at Berkeley, MIT, and the Joint Genome Institute in the US. We have, based in the US, Dr. Caroline Popper, who is associated with Johns Hopkins, and Dr. Hyong Tai Kim, who is a representative of Macrogen, who are a strategic partner of Microba that invested in our Series B. They're listed on the Korean Stock Exchange and have labs globally. we've launched our first product with them into the US already. On the business front, the company is chaired by Paddy Rombola, or Pasquale Rombola, ex-Morgan Stanley and Deutsche Bank, very capable on the capital markets front. We have Mr. Richard Bund, who's from an accounting background and runs an accounting practice, as well as myself, who also comes from a business and acquisition background, as Laura touched on earlier. The team in total is 43 of us. We have 17 PhDs in the company, and we've got a healthy mix of very commercially capable individuals, including 3 US-based executives, which are in the process of commercializing our technology in the US. The history of Microba, in the early 90s, Phil Hugenholtz, one of our co-founders, was working with the preceding technology, 16S RNA. He's one of the very early users of that technology and published some papers in the early to mid-90s using that technology. In 2004, our other co-founder, Gene Tyson, published the first shotgun metagenomic paper out of Berkeley in California. Now, that is the technology which Microba is founded upon today. And in 2010, they moved back from the US to Australia to set up a new research institute at the University of Queensland. And from 2010 to 2017, they optimized and built that technology to the point where we spun that out of the University of Queensland in 2017. University of Queensland is now a small shareholder of Microba, and we have complete ownership of the IP. Since coming out of the university in October of 2017, we've raised $19 million of capital. That's enabled us to build labs and launch products globally, including our first product, the Microba Insight Kit, which was launched in July of 2018. Today, we've announced a number of international partnership deals, and we're very well placed to continue this growth trajectory. So what is the business model? We have 2 core aspects to our business. One aspect is the services, where we provide services to consumers, clinicians, and researchers to deeply understand the human gut microbiome. And the second aspect is using de-identified data to understand which bacteria are linked to which disease states, and to further study those drug candidates, and in particular the bioactives these bacteria are producing, to see if we can have a meaningful role in key disease states that we're interested in. Our flagship program's in inflammatory bowel disease, and we'll share some data on that topic shortly. This plays out that business model a little bit further. You can see the services column, where we offer services direct to consumers, practitioners, and researchers. One of the pleasing things that we've learned at Microba is that we no longer need to be the retailer of the product, we can be the wholesaler. This is a platform technology which we've already launched into other markets where people have established distribution networks with healthcare practitioners and consumers, and we're the engine that sits behind that. This lets us go global and scale very quickly. On the right-hand side of the business is about using big data to identify new drug candidates. Those drug candidates are clearly of interest to large pharmaceutical companies, of which we're already in discussions with many about this data-driven discovery program. So, achievements to date, we've sold over 10,000 units. We're on track for meaningful revenue growth. Our first year revenue is 1.9. We're seeing that grow into the range of 2.5 to 3 in this financial year. We've executed 3 major partnership deals. We have a world-leading microbiome data set with 600 novel bacteria, many of which are linked to disease states we're interested in. And in terms of the business, we've been broadly recognized, built out a strong team, and well placed to take the company forward. So what are we most excited about going forward? Clearly, the international distribution partnerships in the US and Europe are particularly exciting. The US market is enormous in this space. The innovative business model we've built, where we can essentially have our platform technology operate as the engine, meaning that we don't need to build labs and sales teams globally. We can use our core intellectual property to enable others to offer a microbiome test. And then finally, it's about drug discovery, using big data to identify the bacteria implicated in disease, study the novel chemical entities that those bacteria are producing and how they're interacting with the immune system, in particular how they suppress key inflammatory pathways associated with disease. So we're in active dialogue with a number of pharma companies about this drug discovery program. We're quite excited with some of the deal precedents in this space. So quickly, the microbiome, I've already explained that it's hosted in the large intestine. It consists of bacteria, virus, and fungi, and it's been shown to be integral in our overall health and well-being, in particular because it's producing a broad range of byproducts that interact with our human immune system. This has resulted in the microbiome being linked to a broad range of disease states, many of which are on the rise. The microbiome has been a rapidly expanding area of scientific and medical research over the last 10 years. You can see the curve that exists there. And that's because we now have the technology to appropriately measure the gut microbiome and understand its role in disease. And Microba is on the forefront of that. The addressable market is estimated to be $4.9 billion. It's a space that is attracting significant investment at the moment. And the US healthcare market alone accounts for a significant portion of that. And we're actively progressed in the US with 3 executives in place in some significant negotiations. So what does the product look like? So first of all, we have a kit, which you can see on the screen there. That's this kit here. That kit offers or contains a small sampling tube. We're dealing with the gut microbiome, which means the sample type is fecal matter. And what we do at Microba is we actually get a small amount of fecal matter on the toilet paper. So you can dab a piece of toilet paper, you can send that back to our lab. And the process we actually take is we extract the DNA off this swab. That DNA is the DNA of the bacteria. So the bacteria have DNA just like we humans have DNA. We use that DNA to understand exactly who is present in the gut microbiome, what they are capable of doing, and how they compare to that of a healthy individual or a disease state that we're interested in. This is all done through an automated laboratory. We have our lab here in Australia set up at the Princess Alexandra Hospital. It has very high capacity, up to 100,000 tests per year. And most of the intellectual property exists in the actual algorithms that process the millions of fragments of DNA that need to be analysed and put back together to give a clear picture of the gut microbiome. That is then delivered to the end user via an online interactive report. The report is customised based on whether you're a consumer, clinician, researcher, and it's also enabled for our partners to offer a white labelled report to their customer base. Speaking of partners, we have executed 3 major deals so far. The first is with the US headquartered company Metagetics. In Australia, they are the leading provider of clinician-only probiotics, and they want to establish a leadership position, particularly in the integrative health space, where they offer clinician-only probiotics, and they would like their clinicians to understand the patient's baseline before designing an intervention and understanding what impact that intervention is having on the patient. So we really offer the yardstick or the science to these practitioners and these companies who want to issue something such as a probiotic and understand if it is actually having a meaningful impact. So it's really bringing science to what is a $35 billion industry, and we're well placed to disrupt that. The second partnership is Macrogen, the Korean Stock Exchange listed company with labs globally. We've already launched a product in the US with one of their subsidiaries called Somagen, which is based out of Maryland in the northeast of the US. And that's an exciting contract that has seen us attract our first revenues into the US market and gives us a good footprint there already. Finally, SynLab is Europe's largest, or one of Europe's largest pathology providers. They have now entered into a letter of intent where we will be launching a pilot program in Spain where they want to offer their integrative healthcare practitioners the ability to analyze the gut microbiome using the latest technology in this space, which is Microba's technology. So that's a really exciting and validating partnership where they will initially launch in Spain, and subject to the success of that, they'll look to launch into their other markets. So how does this work from a business model perspective? As you can see across the top there, we have a range of white labeled products that use the same underlying analysis technology. We then clearly are interested in active referring practitioners. We're interested in the number of kits they use per month and the average price per kit. To paint a picture, in the US, in the integrative space alone, there's 100,000 practitioners, 20% of which we believe routinely use gut testing based on data that we have. Our Australian data suggests 2 kits per month is what's currently occurring, and we can see that increasing. And the average price per kit is roughly 300 Australian dollars, of which we are attracting a gross margin of roughly a little bit over 50%. So it's an exciting way to grow a business globally and rapidly. Just want to change gears for a moment and talk about the therapeutics or the drug discovery aspect of our business. Firstly, we use our gut microbiome data in our database to look at specific disease states. Our flagship program is inflammatory bowel disease. And what you can see in the graph that says 0.97 is our ability to accurately predict, based on whether or not someone has certain gut bacteria, whether or not this individual indeed has inflammatory bowel disease. So we're predicting it with 97% accuracy. And below that, you can see we can further differentiate into the 2 major subtypes of inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, with very meaningful accuracy as well. On the right-hand side, we're predicting treatment response to a major drug in the area, which is the Takeda drug Entyvio. We're doing that with over 80% accuracy. Now, this is exciting not because we can diagnose or predict treatment response, but it's because we can understand the actual underlying role of the microbiome in context of the disease state. The understanding of the disease state lets us understand which bacteria are implicated and potentially having a meaningful causal role in that disease state. From there, we're able to make hypotheses and look at drug candidates that are specific bacteria producing bioactives that are interacting with key inflammation pathways that we're interested in. So at Microba, we've discovered roughly 600 novel bacteria, which are represented by the green dots on the plot. And what we do to discover drugs is we take our database, we apply machine learning to remove confounding factors. We identify key bacteria, we study what chemical entities they are producing, and then we test whether or not those bioactives are indeed suppressing inflammation. Inflammatory bowel disease is clearly a disease of inflammation, and bioactives that suppress inflammation are of great interest to the disease and potentially partnering with Pharma to reduce the severity of that disease. So the IBD market is a $16 billion treatment market. It's got similar pathways to rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and ankylosing spondylitis. On the right-hand side, I just want to change gears again slightly and talk about cancer immunotherapy, where there's some really exciting data coming out for the microbiome. The major class of drugs here are PD-1s and PD-L1s, and these drugs typically have response rates of between 6 and 38% and cost roughly $100,000 per year. We now have meaningful data that the microbiome is one of the key contributing factors as to whether or not someone will respond to the drug. In fact, we've now done some analysis work and demonstrated very high accuracy in predicting who will respond to these cancer immunotherapy drugs. That is exciting not only because we're moving a step closer to making sure the right patients get the right drugs, don't have to pay expensive fees of drugs, nor have the side effects for drugs that don't work, and most importantly, don't waste precious time. But it's also exciting because it opens the door to potentially manipulating the microbiome to improve response rates. So this is something that is of key interest to Pharma, and it's a very exciting space in the microbiome. One of the case studies that I'd like to bring your attention to understand what all of this means is the case study number 2. That is a company called Microbiotica. They entered into a $534 million deal with the Genentech Roche, the major pharmaceutical group. And Microbiotica are in the business of identifying new drugs from the microbiome for inflammatory bowel disease. In other words, very similar to what we at Microba are doing. And we at Microba believe we've actually got a superior approach given the big data that we've been able to capture and analyze to discover novel bacteria. And And I'll show you some data why we have confidence in our superior approach to this. First of all, what we do is we use our world-leading data space. We then apply machine learning to remove confounding factors. So when we're collecting data, it's very rich. It includes things like medication, age, gender, diet, lifestyle. All of these things can influence the microbiome and give a false signal. So we are able to remove those confounding factors through machine learning. And that leaves us with a set of leads. These leads are bacteria that are clearly healthy, present in healthy individuals, but noticeably absent in the disease state, which is Crohn's. So the green bar represents the presence of the bacteria in the healthy individual, and the black bar represents the disease state. Clearly, you can see very strong differences between healthy and disease. We then further validate using external data sets, these including US-based data sets, these leads that we have, and we come up with our high confidence leads. We then take a genome-directed isolation approach. So what that means that we're trying to get these bacteria by themselves or isolated so that we can study them. This isn't a simple step, and it's estimated that most gut bacteria, in fact, have not been brought into pure culture. So it's a very rich area of discovery. This approach that Microba is taking gives us a leg up and gives us an advantage in being able to isolate these bacteria so that we can study their roles. What I'm pleased to say is we've now isolated 4 of those bacteria, and we've got many more significantly advanced. And all 4 of these bacteria are suppressing key inflammatory pathways that we're interested in. The 2 key inflammatory pathways are the NF-kappa B and the STAT3 pathway. And what this means is that we've been able to find the needle in the haystack. We've been able to, instead of try and randomly screen thousands or potentially even hundreds of thousands of bacteria to determine which one is potentially going to deliver an effect, we're able to use big data to hone in on exactly the right candidates and have a high level of confidence around that. This is very exciting for Microba. It's very exciting for Pharma because we're able to find the bacteria that are meaningfully interacting with the immune system and have potential to be producing bioactives that are suppressing inflammation. And clearly this early data is demonstrating that we're making great progress in this space. Just quickly on the financial side, Microba has a strong balance sheet. We've been very well supported. We have key investors in Perennial, Allium, Thorny, so we've been very well supported. We have over $7 million cash in the bank. We've generated meaningful sales in our relatively short life of roughly 2.5 years. We expect that to continue to grow. We're excited about the negotiations and the discussions that we continue to have with Pharma and expect to continue to have as we develop our drug discovery program using big data. With that, I'll conclude and welcome any questions that people might have.
Thank you so much, Blake. That was a great overview. Obviously, you're unlisted, so it's great to actually see everything laid out for us like that. We have a couple of questions. Bubdip has asked, will there be any pre-IPO raise prior to the IPO raise? Don't know if you can answer all these questions, but have a go.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We've agreed as a board that we will undertake a review towards the middle of this year, so in a couple of months' time, and consider if indeed we do want to progress to a pre-IPO or an IPO. So that decision hasn't been made, but we'll be reviewing that in the middle of this year.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming same goes for a lead manager appointed for your IPO. Someone else has asked whether that's happened yet.
I do apologise if there are brokers in the room. We have appointed Bell Potter and Canaccord as joint lead managers, and they have been supporting Microba over the last few months as we consider this decision.
Mm-hmm. Could you share the company's valuation at the planned IPO price?
I'm happy to share that the post-money valuation of our last raise was $40 million. That was done in July last year, so 12 months ago. Clearly, we would look to have a premium given the amount of progress we've delivered since July of last year.
Mm-hmm. Someone else has asked what your key IP is and how it's protected. Obviously, you're operating in a massive market, and you pointed out you put some figures around the market in the US specifically. but it'd be interesting to hear more about what your IP is and where you sit in the competitive landscape in this space.
Yeah, it's a great question. Most of our competitors are still stuck with the old technology that was developed in the 90s. That's called 16S RNA sequencing. At Microba, we've moved to the next generation of technology, which is called shotgun metagenomics. And we have filed a patent in terms of the overall process that we undertake at Microba. So we do have some protection there. But the core intellectual property of Microba is protected. It's actually the algorithms that are able to put back together the puzzle where we have millions of fragments of DNA belonging to thousands of individual bacteria. And we're able to very accurately put back together that broken puzzle. So we retain that as a trade secret as we grow out, but the intellectual property we're most excited about is the novel bacteria and the bioactives that are having a role in certain disease areas. And we're in the process, and we've got a very strong IP support at Microba of considering a number of patent positions around those specific bioactives and the bacteria themselves and the role they're playing in disease. So we expect to see our IP portfolio explode over the next 12 months with the new findings that we've made.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And what proportion of your health practitioners that refer people for microbiome tests are medical doctors? So someone's wanting to know about, how does a customer essentially get the product in their hands? How do we get access to it? How do we hear about it?
Yeah, so clearly there is a consumer product, there is a clinician product, and there's a research product. So as a consumer, you can go online to microba.com and order a test, and that test will be mailed to you. You'll then dab a piece of toilet paper in the privacy of your own home, and you will essentially post that back to Microba in the envelopes that we provide, so it's all very easy to use. Then we analyze that and inform you when the results are available. The question with respect to practitioners, so we do see a very broad mix of practitioner types engaging. We're working all the way from the infectious disease and gastroenterology end of the market through your GPs, integrative GPs, and even down towards dietitians and naturopaths. The reality is that we see more early adopters in the integrative space, but gastroenterologists and infectious disease clinicians are extremely interested in this and watching it very closely. Last year, I attended the Digestive Disease Week conference in San Diego, which is the largest conference for gastroenterologists. They had a dedicated microbiome stream, and that room was completely full. In fact, there was people crowded outside a TV screen outside. So I think the gastroenterology adoption is coming, but at the moment it sits primarily at the integrative and GP level.
Mm-hmm. And at that integrative level, obviously that area of medicine has been quite severely impacted in the last year, or progressively over the last few years, with respect to private health. Do you envision that Microba products will be covered by private health in the future in Australia or in the US? And at what price are they? What are they priced at to start with, maybe, and then what are you looking at for rebates potentially?
Yeah, it's worth noting that Australia for us is very much a pilot market, and the US is our primary focus. We're seeing precedent in the US for tests such as this to be reimbursed at around the $500 mark, which is well and truly above the $350 Australian price point that we offer currently. So there is a nice precedent there. Here in Australia, the journey for reimbursement is quite a long one. I think anyone investing in the biotech space would know that. So the MSAC process is 3 to 5 years typically. So we will go down that path, and ultimately we do expect to achieve success there. But we do need, that we do need to be realistic about the timeframes associated with that. In the interim, we've been seeing fantastic uptake at a user pays model, and people who often have digestive healthcare problems are very willing to reach into their pocket to try and understand what is going on and how they correct that. So the propensity to pay if you are suffering is quite high.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Blake, for shedding some more light on the company, and we'll definitely be following along over the next few months or so. I know you're not going to put a hard date on when you're planning to list, but it's we'll be following and we'll take note.
Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Blake. Next up, before we take a quick break for lunch, we have Antisense Therapeutics. And Antisense is a Melbourne-based biopharmaceutical company developing and commercialising antisense pharmaceuticals for large unmet markets. We'll be back very shortly. Stay on the line. We'll see you soon.